Alrighty, in this video what we're going to do is we're going to start off with writing this code right here. How do we want to deal with errors in our service layer? So really any sort of thing can fail at any point when our code needs to perform some operation. Maybe, for example, when we posted our request to the service layer, we had some invalid input. Like let's say we were changing our display name and we didn't type in a display name, or our email was incorrect, or some sort of validation error happened. Or what if an error happened to where the network was down and we needed to tell the user that we can't access the internet, so, try again because this is pretty much an internet-based application. So how do we handle those circumstances? Well, the answer is all of my response classes I'm going to have derive from a base class that is going to have fields and pieces of data that can contain errors. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create a new class, and the class is going to be a base class, and it's going to be called Service Response. So I'm going to come up here to my infrastructure namespace, right-click, select New, create a new Java class, and create a Service Response class. And I'll go ahead and I'll make him abstract, because we don't want to instantiate this guy ever directly. We only want to instantiate the things that inherit from this class, which will be, for example, change avatar response. So what is the service response going to have? Well, it's going to have all of the data that will be present on every single service response. In this case, errors, validation problems. So let's go ahead and start off. I'm going to go ahead and I'll create a private static final string tag up here at the top, because we will be logging stuff later down the class. Then I'm going to create a private string operation error, private hash map. Oh, come on. You gonna do this to me? There you go. Hash map string and string. So hash map of string and string, property errors, and private boolean is critical. So let's talk about these three pieces of data that our service response class contains. Again, this is data that's going to exist on every single service response. For example, this is data that's going to exist on the account on change avatar response. So in all of my time of dealing with web APIs and service layers and all that fun stuff, I've found that there's really going to be I've serialized down the amount of data required to describe virtually any circumstance. And that is these three fields that you see right here: operation error, property errors, and is critical. Operation error is an error that occurs on an operation-wide scale. So what do I mean by that? Take, for example, an image failing to upload due to it not being in the proper format or something like that. Or maybe better yet, let's say you have a service call that blocks a user, and you told it to block an admin or something like that. I don't know. Something that is, in a general sense, the operation itself has failed. Something in the operation that has to do with more than one properties is having a problem and not succeeding. That's what I consider to be an operation error. So it's not something that's directly tied to a property, but it's sort of general sense. This is something that failed. Some sort of condition wasn't met on the server. Maybe this code doesn't work at a particular time of day, and so on and so on. So something that doesn't have to necessarily do with property errors. So that's what an operation error is. And the idea is that we use the operation error to contain that information, and that information will be passed in from the network request, from the API. Then we have property errors. In this case, it's a hash map of string and string. Property errors are just that. They're validation errors. So let's say your display name was too long, or your email address wasn't correctly formatted. That would be a property error, and that would get put into this hash map. If you're familiar with C# and not so much Java, a hash map is equivalent to a dictionary. Finally, we have is critical. Is critical, basically see as critical as the operation failed due to a invalid state or a bug in the code. So, for example, if you're not connected to the network, or if the API is down, that's a critical error. So I have this Boolean to indicate if it's critical. The Boolean indicates whether or not the operation error represents a critical error. So, for example, in the case that the API is down, is critical will be set to true, and operation error will say cannot connect to the server. Whereas in more general operation error, like for example, you're not authorized to do this, it might say, the operation error might say you're not authorized to do this, but the is critical will be false, because I don't consider that sort of thing to be a critical error. The critical error is reserved for things that you should go fix yourself or wait to try again. Whereas a non-critical error is you messed up. You messed up. For example, you typed in the wrong email address, but a critical error is we messed up. There's a bug in the code, the server's down, the internet's down, the world has ended, that sort of thing. So those are our 3 pieces of data that our service response class is going to have, which is going to mean that these 3 pieces of data exist for every single request in the application, or every single response. So let's go ahead and create some helper methods. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a public service response, and I'm going to create a public constructor, and it's simply going to instantiate property errors. It's going to instantiate it to a new hash map. I'm going to go ahead and create another one, so service response with a string parameter called operation error, and then this one is simply going to say this.operation error equals operation error. I'll create a third one, service response string operation error, and a boolean is critical, and this will say simply this operation error equals operation error, and this dot is critical equals is critical. Now let's go ahead and create some setters and getters. So first I'm going to go ahead and say public string get operation error returns operation error. Public boolean, or sorry, let's do our setter next. Let's do public void set operation error string operation error. This dot operation error equals operation error. Then we'll do public boolean is critical returns is critical. Public boolean set critical. I'm just going to go with set critical, or set is critical. Boolean is critical. This is critical equals is critical. All right, now let's go ahead and create our getters and setters for our property errors. I'm not going to create a getter and setter for the property error in the sense that you'll be able to replace this object. Instead, what I'm going to do is set is critical should be public void, not public boolean. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say public void set property error. Notice the lack of pluralization. String property string error. And this is simply going to do property errors dot set, or put, sorry, property and error. Then I'm going to have a public string get property error string property string error, or whoops, just string property. I'm stupid. Return get property errors dot get property. So this will allow us to get individual property errors. All right, next up, I'm going to write a convenience method. Public boolean did succeed. Now, did succeed will return true if we consider this request to be, or this response to be a success. In that case, it's simply going to be return operation error equals null, or operation error dot is empty. So basically, this first clause says if the operation is null or empty, and property errors dot size equals 0. So it's saying if the operation error is null and empty, and if we don't have any property errors, then return true. Then say yes, we did succeed. Now I'm going to create one more method here that'll look a little silly at first. But basically the idea is that I want to create a convenience method for showing an error toast. So I'm going to say public void show error toast context, context, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say if context is null, return, because we can't display a toast without a context. Then I'm going to say try, and I'm going to say toast.makeToast, passing in context, operation air. Oops, operation air without an underscore because this isn't C#. Toast length long dot show, and then I'm going to add a cache handler in here for exception E, and then I'm going to say log E tag can't create error toast E. So what's going on here? Our show error toast is just it's like the poor man's error validation. We're not going to be doing anything with the UI in particular except showing a little toast that shows the operation error. And that's it. So ignore the fact that it's squiglifying my file name. I don't believe I have any errors. I don't know why it's squiglifying that. Let's go ahead and... okay, that fixed it. Alright, so that's our service response. So every response class is going to inherit from service response. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and jump into my account class, which again, the account class is nothing more than a wrapper around other classes so that I don't have to create a million namespaces or a million classes. And I'm going to change my change avatar response, and I'm going to say extends service response. And I'm going to do this for every single response class. So what does this afford us? Now that I say change avatar response extends service response, I can now jump into my profile activity and implement this to-do. And I can say, if not, response.did succeed, response show error toast this. And that's it. So now, the error will be displayed to the user from the service layer. And that's it. I just want people to appreciate how little code is required to work with this. And how we have so many options now. We can write a synchronous service layer, an in-memory service layer, a service layer that hits the web, a service layer that does its things internally, a service layer that's asynchronous. And we also can subscribe to events that transcend the activity lifecycle. So I think that's pretty awesome. All right, so what I'm going to do now is let's go ahead and do our other to-dos. So let's go ahead and do this to-do. When we show when we update our profile, how do I want to handle that? And this will show you guys an example of how we can handle property errors. Because in this case, we're updating our display name and our email so we can handle their property errors. So in this case, I'm going to use what's called a progress dialog. So it's another quick, fun feature of Android. If you need to really quickly block out the user interface so the user can't click on anything while something is happening, for example, sending a request to update display name and email, we can implement a progress bar. A progress dialog, rather. So let's scroll all the way to the top, and I'm going to create a new private field. I'm going to say private dialog, progress dialog. And I'm also going to do something interesting here. I'm also here at the top of the file, I'm going to say private static boolean is progress bar visible. So this private static boolean is going to survive rotates, and the idea is if the user tells the application to update his profile, and let's say 5 seconds, it takes 5 seconds to update the profile, and the progress dialog is visible. Let's say the user rotates the device. This static boolean will be set to true, and then it'll recreate the progress dialog when the device or when the app or when the activity gets recreated. So what I'm going to do down here is on the onYura_create method, I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to say if is progress bar visible, and then I'm going to say set progress bar visible to true. So this is a method that hasn't been created yet, but we're going to be taking advantage of. So I'm going to write all the rest of the code first that uses this imaginary method, then I'll implement it. So let's scroll down here and now deal with how we're going to do this to-do. So basically, we need to do a couple things. We need to change back to viewing, we need to show our progress dialog, and we need to publish an event to tell the service layer to update our email and our display name. So let's do the events first. I'm going to jump down into services account, and I'm going to create 2 new classes. I'm going to say public static class change, And then here, well, how about just update? Update profile request. And he's going to have a public string display name and a public string email. And then I'm going to create, I'm going to create a constructor by hitting Alt Insert Inner and then hit Shift down to select both display name and email and hit OK to create a convenience constructor. Then I'm going to say public static class update profile response. And for update profile response, he's simply going to extend from service response so that we can get error information. Now note that I'm using static on all these classes. That's incredibly important. If you didn't use static, you would run into an issue. So now let's jump back into our profile activity and fix up this code. So I'm going to remove all this code, and I'm going to change the state. I'm going to keep the change state here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say bus post. Well, no, I'm not going to do the bus post first. Well, that's the last thing I'm going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to update tell our progress dialog bar to be visible. So I'm going to use this imaginary method that hasn't been created yet. And I'm going to say set progress bar visible true. That'll show the progress bar. Change the state to state viewing. And then finally, do bus.post new account.update profile request. And for the parameters, I'm going to pass in display name text dot get text dot toString, and for the email, I'm going to pass in email text get text toString, and maybe split these guys up a little bit so the code looks a little cleaner. And that's it. Now we have our awesome bus, our event bus, our update profile request being sent, our progress bar is visible, and we've changed our state. So let's go ahead and implement our response method. So when our update profile request finishes, we expect there to be an update profile response invoked. So to do that, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to add a new method that subscribes to something. And I'll just do it underneath our onAvatar updated just to keep things a little consistent. I'm going to say subscribe public void on profile updated account dot update profile response. Then I'm going to say if not response did succeed. I'm going to say if response dot, I forgot something. I meant to have it I did actually mean to change my implementation of my service request. I'll do that in a second, our show toast method. But anyway, so I'm going to say if not did succeed, response.showErrorToast this. Then I'm going to say display name text dot set error to response get property error display name. Then I'm going to say email text dot set error response get property error dot email. And that'll show a built-in Android error warning on that text. I actually did mean to do that outside of that did not response did succeed. The reason is if there was no error, this get property error will return null, which will clear the error out of the text field. So if there is no error, then the text field will have the set error be set to null, and there won't be an error. If there is an error, it'll be shown. All right, so that's our on-profile update. The last thing we need to do is make sure our set progress bar visible is changed. And we also need to make sure that if we didn't succeed, we switch back to the editing state. So I'm going to say change state to state editing. And then down here, I'm going to say set progress bar visible is false. So I know that was a little jumping around all over the place. That's the implemented on profile updated. I just missed a couple things here and there, but there it is. Now what we got to do is I got to go into this response show error toast, and I'm going to control click on it to jump into the implementation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if context is null or operation error is null or operation error is empty. So what I'm going to do here is the show error toast is only going to show the actual toast if the operation error has anything in it. So that's it. So yeah, let's go ahead and implement our set progress bar visible. All I need to do on that is show and hide a progress bar. So, or progress dialog. So I'll do that right here. I'll say private void set progress bar visible boolean visible. And then I'm going to say if visible progress dialog, and I'm going to say equals, and then here I'm going to instantiate a new progress dialog dot builder. And then for our context, I'm going to pass in this. Then I'm going to say set title updating profile, set cancelable false, and then dot show. Then I'm going to say else if progress dialog does not equal null, progress dialog dot dismiss, progress dialog equals null. Finally, at the bottom, I'm going to say progress is progress bar visible equals visible. Remember, this boolean is a static boolean that won't be destroyed when the activity is rotated. And that's it. So that's the implementation of our updating our profile. Let's do one more thing here before we move on to the next video. And that one more thing is let's jump into our dialog, our change password dialog, and implement our send new password to server method. So the first thing I need to do is jump into my account.java that contains my events, my requests, my responses. And I'm going to create a public static. And in this case, I'm going to say change password request. And the change password, or public static class change password request. And the change password request is going to have a public string current password, public string new password, and public string confirm new password. And then I'm going to hit control insert constructor and then do that. Maybe rename our confirm new password really quickly, so that it is properly capitalized. Hit OK on that, and let's go ahead and also CO. There we go. And now let's create a response. Our response will be empty, except, of course, it'll be inheriting from service response. So I'm going to say change password response, and then I'm going to say extends service response. And while I'm here, let's fix this typo right here. I'm going to hit Alt-Enter, typo rename to, and I'm going to change it to that, and everything is awesome. Okay, so let's jump into our change password dialog and implement it. So, to implement it, all we got to do is basically the same thing we did in our profile activity. I'm going to go ahead and keep this as quick as possible, so I'm just going to create a private dialog field called progress dialog. I'm not going to worry about recreating this dialog if there was an activity destroy and recreate. That's something you guys can do on your own as an exercise to the viewer. So what I'm going to do down here on the to-do send new password to server, I'm going to delete all this code because it's now irrelevant. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say bus.post new account.change password request. And then for the three parameters, I'm of course going to pass in current password, get text to string. Then I'm going to pass in new password, get text to string. And then of course I'm going to pass in confirm new password, get text to string. So finally, then after, or actually before I do that post, I'm going to go ahead and say progress dialog equals new progress dialog dot builder. And then I'm going to say set title, and I'm going to say changing password, set cancelable false, and then I'm going to say show. Of course, for the constructor, we have to pass in a context, which will be get activity. All right, so now that I've done that, let's go ahead and handle the response code. So I'm going to say subscribe to public void password changed account dot change password response, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say if response did succeed, then we need to dismiss our dialog and show a toast. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to dismiss the dialog. So, or first I'm going to show a toast. I'm going to say toast dot make toast, get activity for the context, password updated for the text, toast dot length long for the length, and then show. And then I'm going to say dismiss. And I also I also have to go ahead and tell the user he now has a password if he didn't already have a password. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say application dot get auth get user set has password true, and then I'm going to say return. Then I'm going to handle the error condition. The error condition is straightforward. It's going to be current password set error response dot get property error current password, and then new password set error response get property error new password, and then confirm new password dot set error response get property error confirm new password. And then I'm going to say response show error toast get activity to show any operation errors that may have happened, such as critical errors in the case that the server wasn't able to be reached. And that's it. So now we have our service calls for our profile pretty much done, and we have our progress bars being displayed. However, if you run this code now, you'll notice that the progress bars never go away. Now we're going to handle that in the next video when we actually create our first bit of the service layer. So our first service class that will do different things. So awesome. I'll see you guys in the next video.